Good evening, students. It's evening here. I'm in Chicago now. I've been here for a few days, visiting with family during the first part of Sukkot. I have to say the weather has been actually spectacular here, unusual in the 60s and 70s, and really had a wonderful time. I'm due back in Boston tomorrow, and you'll get your assignment for next week, most likely tomorrow afternoon. As is my custom, I'd like to do a little bit of a summary of some of the issues and raise some questions, and maybe actually have you, if you want to respond in this discussion, it'd be great as well. And talk a little bit about what we have accomplished in this past week. There were a number of issues to consider these past 2 weeks, and it seems that we have a number of people interested in theology in the class, as well as historiography. Your comments on the four assumptions and Spinoza some of you attempted to have it both ways. You don't like the idea of it being binary, either or, and so on. In a certain sense, I'm not sure that it's possible to do that unless you are willing to view the different strategies of reading and interpreting the text as complementary and not as capable of synthesis. The Bible can be read, in fact, as a cryptic document or the perfect Word of God, but not at the same time as one is reading it in a historical, critical manner. One can't use proofs from one strategy to prop up another strategy. I love using Midrash on biblical texts, but the assumptions that empower Midrash are radically different from the assumptions that are used when we read the text historically or for pshat. We certainly can have multiple ways to engage the text, but in my view we must be careful to keep our categories and claims about that text distinct. I'm trying to figure out a way to do better with the camera here. Maybe that'll do better. As we look at the first 11 chapters of Genesis as a whole, we see that they are the prehistorical chapters, and I've mentioned the particular characteristics of these chapters. They don't follow so easily one from the other, and they represent some basic attitudes and approaches of the narrator to the fundamental questions of human existence. We didn't really get a chance to discuss them, but the cosmological questions, I think, are paramount when we think about myth. What is a myth? What is a sacred story? Fundamentally, they're asking questions about who we are. As I think I mentioned in the introduction, these are stories that are offered as cosmogonic stories about origins of things, but in fact they really are cosmological. They're really asking questions about the nature of being. What is God? What is human? What is the relationship of God and humanity to nature? What is the power of nature in and of itself? Does it have independent power? The Bible seems to tell us it really doesn't. It's all under God's power. Where does evil come from? How do good and evil work? How are human beings accountable for their behavior? Is there such a thing as conscience? Why do people fight with each other? Finally, at the end of these materials, a question is answered, and that is, how does it come about that from one group of people living together, we come to a situation where there are lots of people living around the world, each with a different language. This brings us, after the story of the Tower of Babel, we finally come to Genesis 12, where we move from prehistory to history. I'm not talking about the material that we have from Genesis 12 forward as writing history, as history writing, as somehow or other modern ways of compiling events, but rather the phenomenon, the narrator is talking about the phenomenon of regular people, heroes, but regular people engaging in normal life events. By the way, the beginning of Genesis chapter 6 is one of the strangest stories in all of the Bible, the sons of God, the daughters of men, and so on. I've been struggling to try to figure this story out. I have some ideas, but don't really have a very good one. Can any of you figure out what is really going on there? And what it means, Genesis 6, 1-6, sort of if you want to give a shot to that, I'd be interested in this discussion forum to raise that issue. The prehistorical stories that are told resemble stories of other cultures in the ancient Near East. How do we relate to this piece of information? From my point of view, we should look at the distinctive frame the Bible gives to these stories, not so much in competition with the other cultures, we're better or they're not better or whatever, but rather as a way to focus on the distinctive character of the biblical narrative, much in the way that Sperling tries to argue. It is my sense that most of you, as you were engaged in the discussion about these and similar issues, were asking questions and giving responses which were entirely in line with the frame of reference of the authors we read. Your discussion, ideas, and syntheses were excellent and clearly advanced the conversation. It would be very interesting to be able to spend more time on this material. I have a sense that that will be the case with many of the lessons in the course. This is actually intended to whet your appetite as well as to give you a glimpse of what treasures still await you. I have to say once again that the quality of the conversation, the quality of the discussion is really one of the best that I have seen in any of the courses that I have taught, and I really want to compliment you on that and hope that we keep it up, and I hope your energy stays with the course as we move forward. We still haven't dealt with the feminist readings in the materials. We will return to these issues throughout the course and in the next lesson as well. At the end of the discussion thread about feminism and so on, I gave you a little bit of my own sense of perplexity about this. But whether that's the case or not, focusing on gender and feminist readings of these texts offer us a new and interesting way to read the text and to garner meaning, including pshat meaning. We've talked about this in the discussion thread. It is my hope that thinking about gender and gender issues will become a normal and natural way for us to read any text, and the results of such considerations will be a natural and expected way to study the Tanakh and other Jewish texts and non-Jewish texts. This coming week we will be moving our reading to the rest of the book of Genesis. We'll be focusing primarily on the historical context, see the reading by McCarter, and a literary reading, see Auerbach. I also will be asking you to take a text of your choosing and subject it to a literary analysis, or if you like, a historical one. But the first thing to do is to read the rest of the book of Genesis carefully. As always, I'm happy to continue this discussion in the discussion thread below, any of the issues that are raised here. And I'm also happy to speak with you, to correspond with you specifically. You can always send me something, I think, in the Dropbox, or drop me an email if you'd like to ask me about issues or raise questions or aggravated by things that I've said or done. I'm happy to engage with you about any of that. And have a good week, and I'll be talking with you again next week. Bye.